Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head over to Germany once again, and this is another one of the Brauhaus beers that I brought back from my recent trip over there. So I had 5 of these with me, and this is number 2 of 5 in the series that I'm reviewing for you. So for this one we are going to go to Magdeburg in Sachsen, Anhalt, and visit Privatbrauerei Diamant, and this is their Weisser bock beer, which is actually quite an interesting style of beer, so I'm quite glad that I got to bring this one back and review it for you on the channel here. But as is usual with my beer reviews then, I'll take you through a very brief history of the brewery. It will only be a minute or two long, but if you do want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. The brewery website's in the description for you below in German and in English, and there's also a link down there to my other reviews that I will add from Privatbrauerei Diamant in the near future. One of them will appear in the next 2 or 3 days, but hopefully I can get back to Magdeburg and get some more of their beer sometime. But anyway, Magdeburg is a city of 230,000 people to the southwest of Berlin, and it's actually the capital city of the German state of Sachsen-Anhalt. It's a really quite beautiful town actually, a huge big church in the middle of it, a nice river going by, and the sort of town square where I'm guessing it's the Rathaus, the municipal buildings, is actually very nice. So really worth checking out if you do go and explore a little bit around Berlin. But anyway, this brewery began, the Diamant Brauerei began when Albert and Hermann Wernicke founded Brauerei AH Wernicke in Berliner Straße in Magdeburg back in 1841. But the brewery expanded over the next few years due to the increasing demand for their beer, and it became fully equipped with various different professional equipments. So the company was turned into a public limited company in 1872, and this was as a result of Hermann's death and also Albert's long-standing illness. But luckily Hermann's son Gustav took over the running of the brewery, and he expanded it even further to include a private ice cellar, just like you know, a malt house, and also a railway connection as well. And what you'll always find when you actually research German breweries is that they always like to point out when they did their infrastructure investment, and that's just a kind of thing. I think it's a German sort of mentality when it comes to business. They like to document their progression from being a small company into a larger and more successful company. But it's always interesting to read that about German breweries. But anyway, in the early 20th century they acquired the Feldschossen brewery in Wittenberg, and they also formed an association with the other small breweries in Ochersleben, Zerbst and Leipzig. But in 1937 this was when they became known as the Diamant Brauerei and introduced the Diamant trademarks, which they do retain to this day. And just so you know, Diamant actually does translate into English simply as diamond, so this is literally the Diamond Brewery. But this is where the history of the brewery gets quite interesting. In fact, during the war the brewery was heavily damaged but recovered quickly to become a state enterprise after the war, known as VEB Brauerei Magdeburg Neustadt. And the brewery was again modernised in the 1960s before it once again became a private enterprise in 1991, and this was when it came under the ownership of First Kulmbach Actiam Brauerei. And Kulmbach has a very nice castle, and it's quite a well-known beer town near Bamberg actually. But this is the typical story when it comes to East German breweries and even Eastern European breweries. They were private enterprises before the war, they get destroyed during the war, then the socialist governments come in, make them state-owned operations, and then in 1991, with the fall of communism, they do become state-owned, they do become private enterprises once again. But the original brewery building is in Lübecker Straße, and it's largely a ruin today. However, since 2006, brewmaster Friedrich Silva has brewed beer in a small building next to this site, and the community founded a museum to this brewery in 2005, and the Brauhaus is actually in the oldest building on the site, which was built in 1841. And what you will notice when you actually go and visit this brewery, much like many of the Eastern European towns that you'll find, there is a very old town that's been restored recently since the fall of communism, and there is the new towns as well. So in Magdeburg, in the western part, you've got the Altstadt, the old town, and then Neustadt is in the east, and this is where you've got a lot of the kind of concrete sort of communist block buildings, if you like, that are quite common in Eastern Europe. And the brewery is in the Neustadt next to all the old communist buildings, but it is quite a nice little building. But it really is worth going and checking out. You know, they've got some nice food and nice beers as well. But anyway, that's your kind of brief history of the brewery itself. Just to list the other beers you can get from Privatbrauerei Diamant, they've got the Breyhan Tafelbier, Festbier, Fritzensweizen, Luxator, Pils Unfiltered and Unfiltered Pils Beer, Diamant Schwarzbier, Black Beer, Weihnachtsbier, which is their Christmas seasonal, and they've also got the Weisser bock. I believe this is actually their spring seasonal beer, because I did ask them in the brewery for a Yahrzeit beer, or seasonal beer. So this one I'm sure is actually the seasonal, and I do have another one which is one of the regular beers. But anyway, let's get on to the tasting of this beer itself. So I can't actually tell you what hops and things they put into this beer as I normally would, but it is a 6.1% alcohol Hellerbock beer, so a nice, you should get a nice big bready, sort of somewhere between a nice dark kind of caramel bock and a nice big bready middle in there. So it's quite an interesting style, this, as I said, and this is why I was quite glad that I could bring this one back to review for you. But as you can see, it's got a nice ram's head on it there. I'm not sure why they've chosen that particular symbol, but you can see just on the top there, that is the Diamant symbol there, the nice diamonds, there's nice shine sticking off the diamond, and it says Zeit 1841, which really means founded in 1941. It's a bit of, or 1841, sorry, it's one of these kind of random German words that's got a couple of translations and you can use it in different ways. But anyway, without further ado, let's get this guy open and we'll get on with the tasting here. Didn't open as I was expecting. I was expecting it to make a nice big pop, as many of these German beers do. But let's get this guy out and into the glass then. This is going to be a bit difficult to pour. But I'm only going to pour a little bit of this because I am sharing it with my dad, so I'll just try and pour roughly about half of this beer. Yeah. So as you can see, it's poured quite nicely. It actually just looks like a straight up Helles beer, if I'm honest with you. That's just looking at it, but I'll bring up the light and let you have a look at the colour of this one quickly. So as you can see, a nice bright goldeny amber colour, a little bit hazy. If I put my fingers behind it, you can see through, but it does have a little bit of haze to it. There's a kind of finger and a half of a very frothy white head there, but it is quite bumpy at the same time, and there's a good bit of visible carbonation in here too. Some big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, but quite a lot of it rushing up towards the bottom of the head of the beer. But it looks very, very nice. So let's have a look at the aroma of this guy. I'll just put the light back down so you can actually see the label of the beer. But this is a typical thing. I love this with these German beers. This is only a 0.75 litre, by the way. For some reason, most of them use 1 litre like bottles, but this one seemed to use a sort of 0.75 for some reason. But anyway, good beer nonetheless. So it actually has a very nice sort of sweet malt base on this one. It's quite interesting. You've got a big kind of bready, yeasty character coming out of this one. Just a little bit of banana sweetness and maybe some kind of spicy character too. But I want to say that it is actually quite a caramelly beer. But a nice big sweet bready yeast character and a definite caramel presence in there. It smells so sweet. I always love the smell of the kind of big bready German beers. For me, the Helles beer is it's my go-to session beer. If I can get a German Helles beer, that is really heaven for me. That's my most sessionable beer that I really, really like. And this one smells like a really beautiful Helles, but I know it's not. You know, there is a little bit of banana yeast in there and some nice grassy hops and a little bit of citrus. And you can smell the caramel underneath that too. It's only when you breathe it in a bit more deeply that you're getting a little bit more of the kind of banana and slightly kind of clove, peppery and wheaty spice characteristics out of this one. But it smells really nice, and do just take a little smell of your beers if you get the chance to try some German ones, but it looks very, very nice. So this is the Weisser bock from Privatbrauerei Diamant Magdeburg in Sachsen, Anhalt in Germany. Prost! Now that is really nice. It has the typical characteristic of these big German beers, that it's got a very nice smooth carbonation in there, and it's just got a beautiful blend of flavours, this one. It's a big bready beer. Typical German brewhouse beer, and it's beautifully done. So yeah, much like the aroma, like I was saying, you've got a nice big bready malt base in there, and that just blankets the tongue as soon as you go into it. But you've got a little bit of banana sweetness on top there, and some kind of more fluffy, yeasty character, if that makes sense. And within that you can just pick up a little bit of the wheat and clove in there, but it's not actually too spicy in comparison to, for example, if you think about a Hefeweizen beer. It's really quite different from that. And the Weisser bock styles, it's almost like there's a sort of combination between the Maibock beer, which is a big bready, and just a little bit. The Maibock beer is quite an interesting one. It's a spring beer with a good bit of grassy hop and a big bready malt base, but it's a little bit more toasted and caramelly than your typical Helles beer or Pils. So it's a really interesting one. Kind of floral hops they usually use in that, in my experience. But this is very, very interesting because it is more like a Helles beer, but with just a little bit of, just a kind of very light hint of the Hefeweizen sort of banana and yeasty flavour. So this, I can see why they're calling it a Hellerbock beer. When I saw a Weisser bock, I was expecting something a little bit more along the lines of, for example, Aventinus, you know, like what they call it, a Weizenbock, but obviously the Hellerbock is quite a different style. But yeah, it's beautiful. You know, this beer is such a sessionable beer, and you could easily sit in the Brauhaus and drink quite a few of these ones actually. But it's got a really nice big bready malt base, some nice banana and yeasty sweetness that just goes in there, a little bit of yeasty fluffy character and some wheat and clove spice. But there's an underlying caramel element to it as well that just adds a little bit of sweetness in there. And around the edge of the palate there's just a very smooth grassy hop, but it is very mild. It's not very aromatic, just a little bit of a kind of nice smooth grassy hop in there, and there is a little bit of lemony citrus, particularly around the front curve of the tongue. But this is a beautiful, beautiful beer. If you do happen to find yourself in Magdeburg, it's quite a random place to go and visit, but there is some good beer there, and that's typical of most German towns, in fact. But yeah, it's beautifully done. When the liquid's actually in your mouth, you'll get a little bit more of the sort of citrusy and grassy hop coming out. It's a little bit, the citrus is a little bit sharper on the tongue when the liquid's actually moving over your tongue, but it kind of fades away to just be a nice little, just slightly sharp on the very front of the tongue there. But this beer is beautiful, I have to say that. There's no other way you can describe that. It's a very kind of smoothly flavoured, and it goes together just really well like that, and it's beautiful. If you do get the chance, do try it. In terms of the mouthfeel of this one, it's quite mid-bodied, a nice smooth carbonation. It does have a little prickle initially, and that helps bring out the kind of more hoppy flavours, a little bit of the sharper grassy and citrus flavours like I was saying. But this is a more malt forward beer. It's got a nice sweet malt base in there, bit of sort of yeasty sweetness, some banana-y flavours, and just a teeny bit of spice too. But there is a little bit of hoppy dryness that just sits there on the edge of the tongue. But a very much malt forward beer, and a typical big German bread beer. And interesting in terms of the style too, because of the Hellerbock. It's got just it's almost like a sort of Munich Helles beer, but with just a touch of the kind of Hefeweizen characteristic. That's probably a good way to describe it from someone who isn't too familiar with their German beer. But it is beautiful, and if you do get the chance, go and check out these guys. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. I hope this one isn't kind of a too obscure beer to be reviewing on my channel, but I love doing the German Brauhaus beers. Such good quality beer you can get in Germany. It really is unreal. But if you do happen to have tried this beer, please let me know in the comments section below your own thoughts on it. Always interesting to read it, particularly from my German viewers. It's always interesting to hear their takes on some of their local beer, particularly with me being an outsider. But let me know in the comments section your own thoughts on it below. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, share. I hope you're enjoying this kind of mini series of German Brauhaus reviews, and there's another 3 of these to come for you soon. Cheers.